Opening disclaimer. This is the narration of a final aviation investigation report published by the National Transportation Safety Board. The report number is Air 2504, and it was adopted on June 24, 2025. The findings, probable cause, and safety recommendations described here reflect the conclusions of the investigation. Flight and Aircraft Overview. On January 5, 2024, at about 5:13 in the afternoon Pacific Standard Time, Alaska Airlines Flight 1282, a Boeing 737-9 airplane, registration N704AL, experienced an in-flight separation of the left mid-exit door plug and rapid depressurization. During climb after takeoff from Portland International Airport in Portland, Oregon, one flight attendant and 7 passengers received minor injuries. The captain, the first officer, 3 flight attendants, and 164 passengers were uninjured. The airplane sustained substantial damage. The Boeing 737-9 is part of the Boeing 737 MAX family of airplanes. It is manufactured by Boeing Commercial Airplanes, a business unit of the Boeing Company, which holds the type certificate for the airplane. The Boeing 737-9 was originally certificated in 2018. Per its type certificate, it is operated by a minimum crew of 2 pilots. The airplane is powered by 2 CFM International LEAP 1 B-28 engines, each capable of producing 29,317 pounds of thrust. It is 138 feet long and 41 feet tall, with a 12-foot fuselage diameter and a 118-foot wingspan. A mid-exit door plug is a rectangular airframe structure about 29 inches wide and 59 inches high that is installed in a fuselage opening and secured in place by bolts and other hardware. Per design, the Boeing 737-9 is equipped with a rectangular opening on each side of the fuselage aft of the wing that can accommodate either an emergency exit door or a mid-exit door plug for configurations that did not require an emergency exit door at that location, such as the accident airplane. A mid-exit door plug can be installed as a lower weight, less complex option. The accident airplane was equipped with 2 mid-exit door plugs, one on each side of the fuselage, The accident airplane's plugs were each equipped with a full-size passenger window. When viewed from the exterior, the outline of each plug was visibly discernible. When viewed from the interior, cabin sidewall panels at the plug locations were visually similar to other panels, such that no plug outline was visible. Access to the plug attachment hardware on an in-service airplane requires the removal of interior panels and underlying insulation. The scheduled domestic passenger flight operated under Title 14 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 121. It departed Portland at about 5:07 in the afternoon, bound for Ontario International Airport in Ontario, California. Alaska Airlines took delivery of the airplane from Boeing on October 31, 2023, and placed it into service on November 11, 2023. At the time of the accident, the airplane had accumulated 510 hours and 154 cycles. The National Transportation Safety Board's review of Alaska Airlines maintenance records found no record of any work since delivery that would require opening the left mid-exit door plug. The maintenance logs documented illumination of the cabin pressurization, auto fail light during flights on December 7, 2023, January 3, 2024, and January 4, 2024. Alaska Airlines performed maintenance in response to each event, including a January 4, 2024, request for additional troubleshooting of the repetitive defect. Per Alaska Airlines maintenance policy, if a defect is reported 2 times in 10 days, the discrepancy must be evaluated by technical services. The airline also restricted the airplane from certain extended range operations so that it would remain near maintenance bases should another auto fail light illumination event occur. At the time of the accident, the airplane was also restricted from extended range operations due to the deferral of an aft fuel boost pump per Alaska Airlines minimum equipment list. Alaska Airlines began operating under that name in 1944. At the time of the accident, it had a fleet of 231 Boeing 737 airplanes, including 65 Boeing 737-9 airplanes. Weather and runway condition. At 4:53 in the afternoon, the weather at Portland International Airport included wind from 180 degrees at 11 knots, visibility 10 miles, ceiling overcast at 6,000 feet above ground level, temperature 10 degrees Celsius, dew 0.4 degrees Celsius, and altimeter setting of 30.23 inches of mercury. Portland International Airport was a joint civil-military airport at an elevation of 31 feet above mean sea level, with 3 paved runways. Runway 28 left/10 right was 11,000 feet long and 150 feet wide. Runway 28 right/10 left was 9,825 feet long and 150 feet wide. Runway 21/3 was 6,000 feet long and 150 feet wide. Approach setup and speed policy. The accident flight was the first leg of the captain and first officers, one day pairing for a round trip from Portland to Ontario. The first officer performed the external pre-flight walk-around and observed nothing abnormal except ice on the wing. She called for an ice check, and the airplane was de-iced. The captain was in the left seat and was the pilot flying. He conducted the departure briefing with the first officer. In the cabin, the flight attendants conducted the passenger safety briefing. The captain said that he and the first officer had already briefed that if they had a problem, they would return to runway 28 left, and had the localizer and radio frequencies already set up. The taxi, takeoff, and initial climb were uneventful. Second by second final segment with exact times and values. Flight data recorder data recorded the following key times for the event sequence. All times are Pacific Standard Time at 5, 12, and 33 seconds. The airplane was climbing through about 14,830 feet when the cabin pressure dropped and the cabin altitude warning activated. 1 second later, the master caution alert activated. The cabin altitude greater than 10,000 feet warning included the illumination of warning lights on the panel and a continuous audible warning horn. The captain heard a loud bang. His ears popped. His head was pushed forward, and his headset was pushed nearly off. The first officer's ears popped. The flight deck door blew open. Her headset blew off due to the rapid outflow of air, and the cabin altitude warning horn sounded. The flight and cabin crews were unaware the flight deck door was designed to open during rapid depressurization. This feature was not in the Boeing or Alaska Airlines manuals. It is an accepted industry design practice. Both pilots immediately retrieved and donned their emergency oxygen masks. Each mask automatically provided oxygen and activated its microphone when unstowed. Donning masks and establishing communications were the first two memory items in the emergency procedure. Both completed these steps before retrieving the checklist. The first officer initially reached for the manual microphone selector, a Boeing 737 next generation feature, before remembering that the mask microphone is automatically selected on the Boeing 737 MAX. The captain asked the first officer to declare an emergency and request a lower altitude. She selected the overhead speaker on the audio control panel and contacted air traffic control. Both pilots noted the loud noise on the flight deck made it difficult to hear. The captain disconnected the autopilot and auto throttles and began descending to 10,000 feet at 5:13 and 41 seconds. The airplane reached its maximum altitude of 16,320 feet, then began to descend. About 1 minute after the cabin pressure had dropped, at 5:13 and 56 seconds, the selected altitude changed from 23,000 feet to 10,000 feet. The first officer pushed the altitude warning horn cutout switch to silence the warning. She reached for the quick reference checklist on the glare shield panel, but it was not there. After landing, she found it behind her seat. The captain retrieved the quick reference handbook from the control stand, and the first officer read the rapid depressurization procedure aloud while handling communications. At about 5:15 and 7 seconds, both cabin pressure controllers went into standby mode, indicating the crew placed the system into manual mode. Shortly after, they manually commanded the outflow valve fully closed. At 5:17 and 0 seconds, the airplane descended below 10,000 feet. At 5:18 and 5 seconds, the cabin altitude greater than 10,000 feet warning deactivated. Flight attendant D had just stood up to unlock the forward lavatory when the flight deck door struck her, bruising her right arm and knee. She sat back down and struggled to close the door. All 4 flight attendants donned oxygen masks. A pre-recorded announcement played in English and Spanish for passengers to put on masks and remain seated. All flight attendants reported it was very loud in the cabin. Flight attendants D and B each used a portable oxygen bottle assist in keeping the plug raised. The investigation determined the left plug displaced incrementally upward during previous flights. Multiple parallel dark lines of dust, dirt, and petroleum jelly on the upper inboard side provided evidence of this movement. Dynamic loads from normal vibrations gradually moved the unsecured plug upward by fractions of an inch. A dynamic loads analysis found that inertial loads during normal operations could reduce the effective plug weight. The nominal weight was 63 pounds, but loads of 0.4 to 0.45 g reduced the effective weight to about 25 pounds. During the accident flight, the plug displaced upward enough for the stop fittings to disengage, and the plug separated outboard and aft. The upward displacement would not have been readily detectable during a routine walk-around. Investigators tested the undamaged right plug and measured the exterior gap at 3 positions. Fully down, the gap was 0.079 inch. With some upward movement, 0.315 inch. At the point of instability, 0.63 inch. This difference was subtle when viewed from the ground. Boeing's engineering review found that even a single vertical movement arrestor bolt could prevent upward movement. Also, only the 2 upper guide track bolts could sufficiently limit movement to prevent disengagement. Wreckage distribution and distances. The left mid-exit door plug, a seat 26A seatback tray table, a seat 25A headrest, and pieces of interior sidewall were found along the flight path and recovered. The plug was recovered largely intact. The 4 bolts, washers, castle nuts, and cotter pins were not recovered. The National Transportation Safety Board Materials Laboratory examined the plug. All 12 plug stop fittings and 12 stop pads were intact. 6 stop pins had damaged, missing heads. Sliding contact marks on the stop pins and frame fittings were consistent with the plug displacing upward before clearing the fittings. The upper guide fittings each had a vertical fracture consistent with overstress. No pre-existing cracks were found. No bolt contact damage was found around any of the 4 bolt holes, indicating the bolts were missing before the plug moved. Faint washer outlines around the upper bolt holes indicated hardware had once been installed but subsequently removed. Cabin damage included deformation of seats 25A and 26A, missing headrests and oxygen masks near the hole, and buckling of interior panels from rows 1 through 27. Injuries and the report's serious injury definition: 7 passengers and 1 flight attendant reported minor injuries. No one was transported to a hospital. Passengers reported bruises and neck or ear pain. Flight attendant D received bruises from the flight deck door. None of the 3 lap-held children sustained injury. 2 additional passengers independently sought medical observation for a chronic condition and were released the same day. Crew experience and duty context: the captain, age 48, held an airline transport pilot certificate with Boeing 737 and Embraer EMB 120 type ratings. He held a first-class medical certificate issued September 8, 2023, with no limitations. He also held a flight instructor certificate. The captain had been employed at Alaska Airlines since August 2007. He reported about 12,700 hours of total flight experience, including about 6,500 hours in Boeing 737 airplanes and 304 hours in the Boeing 737-9. His training records included basic indoctrination on August 30, 2007, first officer initial training for the Boeing 737 Next Generation on November 16, 2007, captain upgrade on November 17, 2018, initial Boeing 737-9 familiarization training on December 17, 2020, and continuing qualification quarterly training on July 24, 2023. His most recent rapid depressurization simulator scenario was October 2, 2007. The first officer, age 36, held an airline transport pilot certificate with Boeing 737, Airbus A320, Bombardier CL-65, Embraer EMB 145, and Cessna CE 500 type ratings. She also held a flight instructor certificate and an advanced ground instructor certificate. She had been employed at Alaska Airlines since August 2017. She reported about 8,300 hours of total flight experience, including about 1,500 hours in Boeing 737 airplanes and 311 hours in the Boeing 737-9. Her most recent rapid depressurization simulator scenario was August 12, 2021. Both pilots completed initial Boeing 737-9 familiarization training, including a module on oxygen mask and communications differences. Both received hands-on oxygen mask training during continuing qualification simulator events in 2023. The 4 flight attendants were identified as positions A through D flight attendant, a completed new hire training in May 2019. Flight attendant B completed new hire training in August 2005. Flight attendant C completed new hire training in June 2017. Flight attendant D completed new hire training in August 2015. All completed Boeing 737-9 differences training in April 2019. Their most recent annual recurrent training occurred between May and September 2023. Aircraft configuration and weights. The airplane had 2 crew seats, 2 flight deck jump seats, 3 dual-position flight attendant jump seats, and 178 passenger seats divided into first class with 16 seats, premium with 24 seats, and economy with 138 seats. It had 4 Type C floor-level emergency exits and 4 Type III overwing exits at rows 16 and 17. Weight and balance calculations showed the airplane was within limits at takeoff and landing. 3 lap-held children were on board with caregivers in seats 19D, 31E, and 32D4. Unaccompanied minors were also on the flight. A 6-year-old in seat 32C, an 11-year-old in seat 7F, and siblings ages 12 and 17 in seats 32A and 32B. 10 seats were vacant, including seats 26A and 26B next to the plug location. 2 individuals who had checked in for seats 26A and 26B were late arriving and were rebooked onto a later flight. None of the caregivers reported difficulty retrieving or donning oxygen masks. One held a mask in front of his 9-month-old daughter's face because she would not allow it on. Another kept the mask over her 1-year-old son's face without the elastic band. Company landing SOP and definitions. The rapid depressurization emergency procedure required pilots to don oxygen masks and establish communications as the first two memory items. When cabin altitude was below 10,000 feet, the masks could be removed. For the Boeing 737 MAX, removing the mask from the stowage box automatically selected the mask microphone and deselected the boom microphone. To reactivate the headset boom microphone after removing the mask, the crew had to close the right stowage box door and push the test reset switch on the stowage box. This procedure differed from the Boeing 737 Next Generation, which had a manual mask boom switch on the audio control panel for hands-on emergency equipment training. Alaska Airlines used a mock-up trainer with oxygen masks and stowage boxes for both the Boeing 737 MAX and Next Generation airplanes. The mock-up trainer was not equipped with headset jacks or audio control panels. From June 1 to December 31, 2020, due to the pandemic, Alaska Airlines exempted donning oxygen masks during training. Investigators found that before the accident, the 3 simulator instructors at Alaska Airlines were not aware of and not teaching that the test reset button must be pressed to reestablish boom microphone communications on the Boeing 737 MAX. The flight attendant manual stated that in a rapid depressurization, flight attendants should immediately don the nearest mask and secure themselves. If oxygen was still needed, they should move mask to mask toward a portable oxygen bottle. Flight attendant D had difficulty removing the portable bottle mask from its plastic packaging and used her identification badge to puncture the pouch. Flight attendant B found it awkward to remove the mask and uncoil the tubing. The airplane's supplemental oxygen system provided 4 masks at each passenger seat unit. It activated automatically at a cabin pressure altitude of about 14,000 feet. All oxygen masks deployed and all chemical oxygen generators produced oxygen. 60 of 62 generators were found displaced aft. Those with flat pads under the retention straps had moved, some as much as 0.75 inch. The 2 that did not move had grooved pads. Boeing identified an adhesive issue with the flat pads supplied from August 2019 through December 2023, potentially affecting 541 Boeing 737 MAX and 138 Boeing 737 next generation airplanes. Boeing discontinued the flat pads and issued service bulletins, landing gear description and findings. The report does not provide details for this section. The accident involved an in-flight door plug separation, not a landing gear event. Flight control's findings. The report does not provide details for this section. Wing, fuel, and fire findings. The report does not provide details for this section. Engines and minimum equipment list deferred items. The engines were not factors in this accident. The airplane was restricted from extended range operations due to the deferral of an aft fuel boost pump. Emergency locator transmitter behavior. The report does not provide details regarding emergency locator transmitter behavior. Post-accident testing of all 3 interphone handsets and the flight crew oxygen mask microphones revealed normal audio volume and clarity. Communications over the public address system were audible when test announcements were made. The post-accident testing performed with the airplane on the ground could not replicate the environmental conditions present during the accident flight, such as the noise and rushing air in the cabin and on the flight deck. Recorders and components sent for memory recovery. The airplane was equipped with an L3 Harris FA 2100 cockpit voice recorder designed to record a minimum of 120 minutes of audio. The recovered audio began at 6:31 and 29 seconds in the evening, about 1 hour and 20 minutes after the plug separation, and more than an hour after the flight landed. The audio from the accident flight had been overwritten. Alaska Airlines Flight Operations Manual specified that flight crews involved in an incident or accident were required, if possible, to pull the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder circuit breakers as soon as possible after the airplane is secured. This did not occur following the accident. By the time maintenance personnel responded to pull the circuit breaker, the recording was lost. The airplane had an L3 Fairchild FA 2100 flight data recorder with a minimum of 25 hours of capacity. About 68.25 hours of data, including the accident flight, were extracted normally. A quick access recorder provided about 31.75 hours of data, including the accident flight and 8 previous flights. During the accident flight climb, the cabin pressurization system was in automatic mode and tracked the normal schedule. When the pressure rapidly decreased, the controller commanded the outflow valve closed. Once the airplane descended below about 14,760 feet, the controller resumed control. The airplane's cabin pressurization system used two identical cabin pressure controllers, with one serving as the controller in command and the other as backup, alternating each flight leg. Post-accident testing of both controllers identified no faults. Both passed the manufacturer's acceptance test procedure. Data from non-volatile memory showed the auto fail light had illuminated during 4 flights since delivery. On November 10, 2023, December 7, 2023, January 3, 2024, and January 4, 2024. One event was recorded for one controller, and 3 were recorded for the other. The fault signatures were identical for all 4 events and were consistent with an intermittent failure of a universal asynchronous receiver-transmitter microchip. The manufacturer's review of repaired controllers found that 10 of 585 repaired units had the same fault code sequence, and each had microchips from the same manufacturing lot as the accident airplane's controllers. Quick access recorder data for the 2 most recent events showed that when the faults occurred, the alternate controller took command automatically with no disruption to cabin pressure. The investigation concluded the pressurization system operated as designed. There was no evidence the auto-fail events were associated with the plug's upward displacement, evacuation and aircraft rescue, and firefighting response details. No evacuation was performed. After landing, flight attendant announced for passengers to remain seated and was told no evacuation was necessary. The pilots taxied to the gate. Rescue personnel and paramedics were waiting. Investigation focus areas list. The investigation identified 35 findings and a probable cause. The probable cause was the in-flight separation of the left mid-exit door plug. Due to Boeing Commercial Airplanes' failure to provide adequate training, guidance, and oversight necessary to ensure that manufacturing personnel could consistently and correctly comply with its parts removal process. This process was intended to document and ensure that securing bolts removed facilitate rework were reinstalled. Contributing to the accident was the Federal Aviation Administration's ineffective compliance enforcement surveillance and audit planning activities, which failed to adequately identify and ensure that Boeing addressed repetitive and systemic nonconformance issues. When the airplane was manufactured, Boeing personnel opened the left plug to allow access for rivet rework. Spirit Aerosystems manufactured the plug on March 24, 2023, installed it on July 18, 2023, and completed final closure, including all 4 bolts, on July 28, 2023. The fuselage shipped to Boeing on August 20, 2023, and arrived at Renton on August 31, 2023. The final assembly process for Boeing's 737 production was typically divided into 10 factory positions, referred to as flow days. On September 1, 2023, Boeing personnel identified workmanship discrepancies with 5 rivets during a routine inspection. Per Boeing's process, Spirit Aerosystems personnel were not authorized to remove completed installations to access a work area. Only Boeing personnel could do so. Boeing needed to open the left mid-exit door plug to allow Spirit personnel access for the rivet rework. Per Boeing's business process instruction for performing parts removals, opening the plug required the generation of a removal record. The purpose of a removal record was to ensure the product was restored according to engineering requirements, to document that a previously accepted installation was disturbed, and to confirm configuration accountability through completed records. A removal record also specified the steps and quality assurance sign-offs required to restore the installation. No removal record was generated. Without it, there was no documentation that the plug installation had been disturbed, and no quality assurance inspection of the plug closure. Boeing tracked the issue using its shipside action tracker. On September 6, a Spirit mechanic documented that rivets were removed and replaced, but Boeing quality assurance found they were actually just painted over. The mechanic later said he confused this airplane with another one. On September 14, 2023, the issue was elevated to Tier 2, the second-level managers, for increased visibility. On September 15, Spirit management indicated that access and removal were needed. On September 17, 2023, the issue was elevated to Tier Tier 3, the director level. A note indicated that personnel would help coordinate access, which included opening or removing the mid-exit door. A senior manager worked with the door manager, and the entry stated, if removal needed, a removal needs to be written first. When interviewed, the senior manager stated that once she learned the fuselage was equipped with a mid-exit door plug, she determined that no door team member who could open the plug was available. She said needing to open a plug was a one-off situation she had not seen before. On the day the plug was opened, the most experienced door team member, who had about 25 years of experience and was typically assigned such tasks, was on leave. He stated that he believed he was the only person proficient in working all Boeing 737 door types, including mid-exit door plugs. He said the need to open a mid-exit door plug did not arise very often, but when it did, such work was typically assigned to him, and he would generate a removal record. Neither the door manager nor any of the 4 other door team personnel on duty had any experience opening a mid-exit door plug. Each of the 4 lesser experienced members had less than 2 years of experience with Boeing 737 doors. The door master lead said that when asked to open a plug, he informed the manager it would require special tools, that he did not have the tools, and that he had never opened a plug. The door manager provided a statement that he did not have an independent memory of asking that the plug be opened, and did not know why a removal record was not generated. On September 18, at 7 in the morning, the door manager indicated the door was being opened. By 11 in the morning, access was available. During second shift that day, a functional test technician recalled being asked to move a stand away from the airplane. He found the plug lying open on the stand, went inside, used a strap to pull the plug up, and let it hang. The investigation determined the plug was open at least from 10:53 in the morning on September 18, 2023, until at least 5:09 in the afternoon on September 19, 2023. A photograph from about 6:39 in the evening on September 19 showed the plug closed with no hardware visible at 3 of 4 bolt locations. The plug was closed during second shift when no door team members were on duty. A review of Boeing records found that since the first production installation of mid-exit door plugs, on a Boeing 737 in 2018, there were 62 instances involving 28 airplanes of documentation generated for opening or removing a plug during production, mostly to enable access for other work. No Boeing security video recordings of the build process were available. Boeing maintained such recordings for 30 days, and the accident occurred after this period. Key findings included the following: the crew was certificated and qualified. There was no evidence Alaska Airlines performed maintenance involving the plug since delivery. The plug displaced incrementally upward during previous flights. The displacement was not readily detectable during a walk-around. The pressurization system operated as designed. The auto-fail events were not associated with the plug. The flight crew demonstrated effective high workload management, reinforcing the necessity of a two-pilot minimum crew. Boeing's business process instruction for parts removals was more than 50 pages long, with more exceptions about when a removal record was not needed than guidance for when it was. It had compliance issues for at least 10 years. Boeing's on-the-job training was unstructured, undocumented, and focused on routine tasks. Only door team personnel could work on plugs, but none were on duty when the plug was closed. Boeing did not conduct a change management assessment when its workforce experience levels decreased significantly. In 2018 and 2019, following two fatal accidents involving Boeing 737 MAX airplanes, the company significantly decreased production. Before 2018, Boeing produced about 52 airplanes per month. During the pandemic slowdown, production was less than 10 per month, but had increased to about 30 to 38 per month before the accident. In 2020, the pandemic resulted in further workforce reductions, particularly among retirement-eligible employees. In 2022, Boeing increased hiring, and many new hires had no previous aerospace experience. Before 2018, about 50% of employees had more than 10 years of experience. At the time of the accident, that figure had dropped to 25 or 30%. Boeing's corrective actions were ineffective. From 2018 to 2023, the instruction was referenced in 16 regulatory compliance issues. From 2018 to 2024. Internal audits found repeated unauthorized part removal issues. Boeing received 35 employee speak-up reports and 12 quality alerts concerning the instruction. The FAA's Certificate Management Office had 23 inspectors and 11 engineers for Boeing. 5 inspectors were assigned to the 737 program. None of their audits specifically referenced the parts removal instruction. The FAA's record systems lacked functionality to identify systemic issues, and records were destroyed 5 years after closure. At the time of production, Boeing had no regulatory requirement for a safety management system. The FAA required one in a 2015 settlement. Boeing's voluntary system became operational in June 2021, but was not yet fully implemented to the 737 production level. None of the FAA inspectors had received safety management system oversight training. None of the Boeing production personnel could describe what a safety management system was. Some expressed fear of being identified as troublemakers. The investigation resulted in 11 new safety recommendations to the FAA and 8 to Boeing, plus 4 reiterated FAA recommendations and 1 to airline trade associations. Key FAA recommendations included revising its surveillance, audit planning, and record systems. The FAA was recommended to retain records older than 5 years, convene an independent panel to assess Boeing's safety culture, encourage hands-on oxygen mask training, review portable oxygen bottle design standards, require cockpit voice recorder preservation procedures, and issue an airworthiness directive for the plug design enhancement retrofit. Key Boeing recommendations included continuing the plug design enhancement certification. The enhancement adds 2 secondary retention devices to prevent upward movement if bolts are missing, plus lanyards for visual indication. Boeing was also recommended to revise the business process instruction, develop recurrent training, create structured, on-the-job training with a grading system, revise its safety risk management process, and develop a process to identify human error escapes. Post-accident, the FAA issued an emergency airworthiness directive on January 6, 2024, grounding all Boeing 737-9 airplanes until plug inspections were completed. The inspections affected 171 airplanes and were completed by January 31, 2024, for all but 4. All 4 bolts were found installed on every inspected airplane. The FAA increased inspector presence at Boeing and Spirit facilities, halted 737 MAX production expansion, and initiated hiring of more than 15 additional inspectors. On April 26, 2024, the FAA published a final rule requiring production certificate holders to implement safety management systems within 36 months. Boeing revised the business process instruction in June 2024, implemented documented on-the-job training requiring door team members to witness, assist, and perform each task under supervision 10 times, and held quality stand-downs with more than 70,000 employees participating. Boeing worked with Spirit Aerosystems on the plug design enhancement. Development was completed as of May 2025, with certification work continuing. Boeing estimated that once certified, the enhancement would be on new production airplanes, likely sometime in 2026. Spirit Aerosystems expanded its quality improvement plan, added inspection points, changed planning to verify bolt installation, and performed joint safety risk assessments with Boeing. Alaska Airlines grounded its 737 fleet immediately after the accident. The airline updated its manuals to clarify flight deck door behavior during depressurization, revised oxygen mask training to emphasize MAX and next generation differences, and updated cockpit voice recorder preservation procedures. The investigation also found that hands-on oxygen mask simulator training lacked realistic exercises. The portable oxygen bottle masks were difficult to use. Alaska Airlines procedures were ineffective for preserving cockpit voice recorder data. More than 20 investigations since October 2018 have been negatively affected by overwritten recordings. Although the 3 lap-held children were uninjured, the potential for severe injury or death exists for children under 2 not secured in a child restraint system. Organizations assisting the National Transportation Safety Board was notified on January 5, 2024, at about 7:40 in the evening, Eastern Standard Time. A GO team arrived in Portland on January 6, 2024. Investigative teams covered operations, structures, materials, systems, survival factors, and manufacturing and human performance. Parties to the investigation were the Federal Aviation Administration, Alaska Airlines, Airline Pilots Association, Association of Flight Attendants, the Boeing Company, Spirit Aerosystems, and the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. A hearing was held August 6 to 7, 2024. The report was adopted June 24, 2025. Soft closing. This concludes the narration of the National Transportation Safety Board's final report for Alaska Airlines Flight 1282. The Boeing 737-9, registration N704AL, experienced an in-flight separation of the left mid-exit door plug and rapid depressurization. On January 5, 2024, in Portland, Oregon, one flight attendant and 7 passengers received minor injuries. The flight and cabin crews executed emergency procedures, and the flight returned safely to Portland, landing about 14 minutes after the event. The investigation identified safety issues related to Boeing's manufacturing processes, training, and quality assurance, as well as deficiencies in FAA oversight. The report also addressed the need for improved oxygen mask training, portable oxygen bottle design review, cockpit voice recorder data preservation, and child restraint systems. The probable cause was Boeing's failure to provide adequate training, guidance, and oversight for its parts removal process, resulting in the plug being closed without its securing bolts. Contributing was the FAA's ineffective compliance enforcement surveillance and audit planning activities. The full report is publicly available from the National Transportation Safety Board.